Are you overwhelmed by the challenge of personalizing communication for thousands of students? That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. From nudging prospective students to guiding those already on their journey, AI assistants don't just automate. They write, build, and optimize every step of your digital campaigns. Discover how at element451.com/AI team.
How can you do a brand campaign in like months, not years, for no money? And how can you make it drive performance very, very quickly? And so I'm excited to unpack it because I think this has been like one of the best insights that we've had over the last couple of years.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your Monday morning energizer covering insights and trends in higher ed marketing and enrollment. I'm Mallory Wilsey, bringing over 15 years of edtech and marketing expertise to your earbuds.
And I'm Seth Odell, joining the Pulse with my own adventures from leading marketing at top universities to founding Kanahoma, one of the industry's fastest growing digital marketing agencies.
Each week, we bring you the kind of insider insights you typically only find over cocktails with your pals at a conference.
It's fast, it's fun, and it's designed for you, the busy higher ed professional.
You're not just listening to another podcast.
You're checking the pulse of higher education.
Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
Welcome back to the Higher Ed Pulse, your 15-minute weekly podcast that is always exactly 20 minutes in length. I am your co-host, Seth, here with the always exciting and wonderful Mallory. Mallory, we marketed this podcast as being a 15-minute weekly episode, and it's always 20 minutes. We can't seem to get this shorter, can we?
No, and we talk about this all the time, Seth. All we wind up doing is talking faster, but it's still 20 minutes. So
I know. We're like, if we talk faster, we'll get through it. Then we just talk the same length, but at twice the speed.
But I'm so sorry to people like me who listen on 1.5 or 2x because we sound like chipmunks sometimes.
It is I do think we are a tough podcast to run at 1.5 speed, which is typically my podcast listening pace. And speaking of pace, though, I think today is the day that we deliver a 15-minute podcast in 15 minutes. I think we can do it.
All right. Well, this is really a challenge for you in a lot of ways, Seth, because we are talking about a topic where I'm going to be taking more of the interviewer seat.
Yeah.
Because recently, right, we were chatting about AI website search, and you kind of interviewed me a little bit on that one. And so I actually wanted to flip the script and interview you on something that is really near and dear to your heart at Kanahoma, which I know happens to be this very interesting way that you are approaching customer onboarding via sprint campaigns. And I am just super excited to learn all about this. So where do you want to start?
I'm happy to. I'll do a quick intro and talk about it. Sprint campaigns has become like a big go-to for us at Kanahoma. And I haven't heard it talked about, and maybe other folks are doing it, but it's just been such a great tool for us. And I've realized it is a tool that can be totally replicable by any institution, and it can be done in-house. So anybody listening to this, sprint campaigns, which we're going to unpack, is just a really exciting, I call it a zero budget brand campaign. But it's basically, how can you do a brand campaign in months, not years, for no money, and how can you make it drive performance very, very quickly? And so I'm excited to unpack it because I think this has been one of the best insights that we've had over the last couple of years, is kind of I'll get into why and how, but basically creating this concept called a sprint campaign.
Amazing. I mean, for people who are just listening and not watching, I've got my favorite mermaid pen out. I've got a piece of paper. I'm ready to jot the notes down so I can ask all the hard-hitting questions here. So
let's do it.
Let's do it. So I think maybe where to start is what is a sprint campaign, right? Let's start by defining it, and then also give me some insight into why you are doing this with your customers.
You got it. So a sprint campaign is basically, how do we develop and launch a new brand campaign, so refreshed creative, but without doing any type of new production, and doing an incredibly quick positioning exercise. So basically, like, how can we do a 80-20 Pareto principle version of a brand campaign in literally like 60 days or 2 months? The reason we got into it is that at Canahoma, like our core offering, we call agency of record. It's basically like digital marketing. We work with 13 institutions at the moment where we manage their marketing spend. We're placing ads across Google, Facebook, traditional media. And so when we onboard a new partner, they're coming to us because they're looking to improve performance. And so we can't tell them we need a huge budget and we need a year. Like, they're looking to get performance in the first quarter. And so we realized that we had to create a way to refresh creative assets and get new campaigns in market on a very expedited timeline. And so it was really born out of necessity, which is like, how do we take the current efforts that you have and launch a new campaign, but we don't have any money and we don't have any time? And so that was the idea of the sprint campaign, was how do we do this in 60 days, not in 6 to 12 months? Again, and mostly focused on how do we do it to improve performance.
So I don't actually believe that you can do this.
We're doing it in 60 days. I can unpack exactly how, and other folks can totally do it.
I'm so excited. So something you just said, though, is you kind of referred to a zero budget brand campaign. And then you also noted you're relying on existing content. So like, let's unpack that first.
Yeah. So the first thing we do with partners when we onboard a new partner is we essentially say, we mail them hard drives and we say, we want every photo and every video that you have at the institution, all of it. Send us everything. And so we'll send up to like a 4 terabyte drive, and folks will send us hours of footage and thousands of images. And we basically, our creative team will go through everything, logging and tagging and organizing it. And so it's sort of like in the movie Apollo 13, where like they dump everything on the table and they're like, how do we get these guys back from space? This is all we have. The first thing that we do is immediately look at all the assets that you have that's ever been produced over the past really 5, 6, 7 years. So the first thing is just like, let's get access to everything. And that's like step number 1 in a sprint campaign, is we call it like material review. So gather and review all photo and video assets. Some of it's in market, some of it isn't. And let's look at the content you already have, because we know we don't have time to go do another production and go shoot something original. So like, give us the ingredients that have been used in your past work. So it's all raw, basically, not looking for like finished commercials, but it's like, give us all of the raw video and photos. That's like the first step, is like what are the ingredients we have in the pantry to cook with, essentially.
Okay, but how are you determining like which one, I think about my pantry, there's probably some stuff that's stale at this point, right? Like,
yeah.
So how are you kind of determining what's effective versus what's past its prime?
Totally. So there's 2 ways. The first thing of what's effective, we actually are looking at like creative quality. So like the caliber of the content first and foremost. So we're reviewing footage, but we also look to repurpose content. So like one common thing that we do is we cut a lot of vertical video. A lot of the partners that come to us, they haven't been doing content maybe the way that ad platforms prefer it, which is like vertical video, a lot of B-roll, high volume of content. So the first thing we look at is just like, can we cut this up and repurpose this? The second thing, looking in at images, we typically look for like, where is there group images, action images, or eye contact? Those are all things that perform well from a performance marketing perspective. Like, super quick tip, eye contact in an image will almost always perform better than someone looking off. The reason is people scroll more than 300 feet of Facebook a day. When they scroll and they see someone looking at themselves, subconsciously, you're more likely to stop. The other thing we look at is like, how can we repurpose the content? So can we cut up a video and use a little piece of it, just use a quick clip? So sometimes it's repackaging. But the other thing is, if you've used old content, it's totally okay to use it again. We typically worry about content tiring far faster than it does. One thing that people forget about is higher ed, for the most part, there are no repeat customers. And there are repeat customers of the industry, but not for the institution. Most institutions, less than 25% of their grad students will come from their undergrad population, which means that 90% of your students are essentially first-time students at your institution. So we look at our marketing, we're like, oh no, we used that 2 years ago, but it doesn't matter because the students you're marketing to today are different than the students from 2 years ago. So it's actually totally okay to reuse content for a very long time. And so it's always okay to repurpose things, but if you can, again, repurpose, don't just reuse. So just recutting a concept, taking images and using different angles of the same setup, taking pieces from a video, putting it in different orders, all those are a way to bring like a freshness to creative without having to go produce something totally new. And 9 times out of 10, just producing something new from something old is enough to improve performance in the market if you're leveraging best practice when you're putting it together. Hey, it's Seth.
Element 451 is hosting the AI Engage Summit on October 29th and 30th. This free virtual event features many of your favorite Enrollify creators and will explore AI's impact on student engagement, enrollment marketing, and institutional success. Learn to tap into AI to automate personalized outreach, improve your emails, streamline content creation, and boost campaign performance. Plus, hear directly from current students on how AI is influencing their engagement and campus life. Don't miss my opening keynote, State of the State, a candid look at where we are and where we need to go. The AI Engage Summit is your guide to understanding and applying AI at your school. Registration is free. Visit element451.com to save your spot. Now, back to the show.
So I imagine that, yes, you're doing this audit for this sprint campaign, but I suspect it's also revealing some things about your client's previous marketing strategies that wind up becoming really useful to the longevity of your partnership. I'm just curious if you have any examples of like surprises that you encountered or like things that come up frequently.
Totally. There's a couple pieces. One is 9 times out of 10, our partners aren't putting enough content into market. So like we'll inherit like a paid social account like on Facebook or on Meta, and they'll maybe have 25 or 30 ads live. Typically for our partners, we'll have 250 or more ads live at a time.
Wow.
Just the volume of ads from like a machine learning perspective. Back in the day, advertising was all about distilling to like one specific idea recommendation. Now it's like, let's just corral the various value props and let's let the market tell us what performs the best by giving a high volume of ads to these platforms to surface. So that's one piece. The second is that a lot of times we can repurpose a partner's value proposition just by qualifying it. And so what I mean by that is what like clarifying statement can you add to a value prop to change it? So instead of saying like, we're really good for social mobility, it's like, okay, well, are you the best private institution for social mobility in your market? Mm-hmm. And suddenly you can say like, Albany's #1 rather than saying we're like 42nd on the US News list.
Right.
Like take all your rankings and then figure out how to qualify it so you go from being 36th or 24th to being first because you've added nonprofit or you've added public or private or your geolocation or the specific programs. This works really well with specific programs. People have #1 programs that they don't realize because they're just not qualifying it. You're not the #1 program in the country maybe for like a certain master's degree, but you might be in your region or in your region for like a private Christian institution. And so take your current value props and qualify them at the same time that you look at the current ads and produce a higher volume of them. Those are like typically two of the biggest ones. And then the other one is just look at the top performing ads that you already have and create like 10 plus variants of those. And so it's like, what are the current winners? Let's just give you more of that. That alone is probably actually the biggest tip of all the things I just shared was like, just take the winners and create more volume of variety of that. So like if this copy is performing well, try it with 4 or 5 different types of images. Or if this image is performing well, find more photos that are similar to it. And I mean similar from like a structural perspective. Like this is a group shot of students walking on campus. Great. Give me all the images you can find of other students walking on campus. Like we're going to push that as a strategy. So it's really double down on your winners, qualify your value props, and then just like figure out how you can push a higher volume of those without trying to find the perfect success story here. We're really just trying to find like more similar around this core idea that like if the winning ads are the nucleus, like we're just going to give a wraparound of like more of that wherever we can.
So you said like this timeline, it's like 60 to 120 days or something like that, all in? Like,
yeah, it's
talk
really
me
rough.
through.
So I will say it's rough. Our team, it's like a full court press when we do it. We do it in 60 days. So if you're doing this internally, I think you can do this internally. And I should say, we call it a zero budget brand campaign, but like people pay us to do it. Like it's zero budget as far as no production, but you can do it internally. But I do want to qualify with your internal resources. Be careful. It's just, tens and tens of hours of work, hundreds of hours of work, really. But getting the hard drive basically takes us 2 weeks. Reviewing the content and tagging and cataloging it takes 2 weeks. In parallel to that first month, we're kind of revamping the brand strategy. So again, we're qualifying an institution's value props, which we're basically looking at what are all the things we can say. We're looking at the winning ads. And so the first month is like distill the strategy and organize the content. And then the second month is basically just producing assets. And so that's where we're just going through and producing dozens of different video ads. And I should clarify, when we say video ads, I don't need a commercial, right? I mean like, maybe it could be 6-second bumper up to 30 seconds of B-roll. We produce things like GIFs. So Facebook doesn't allow GIFs. This is probably the biggest tip of the episode. Facebook doesn't allow GIFs, but you can create a video that is just looped so it looks like a GIF, but you're uploading a video file that bypasses the approval process on Meta and lets you effectively launch a GIF on the platform, which performs extremely well because users aren't used to seeing GIFs. So when they scroll, they stop. And so that first month is basically strategy, asset organization, and the second month is just producing. And the answer is always yes and. It's always like more. And so we can get live a sprint campaign in as much as 60 days. If you're out there listening, I'd give yourself 120 probably if you're doing it for the first time. But it is doable. And also you don't have to do the volume that we do. We produce, hundreds of assets. You could do 50 assets, but it's definitely possible to do it in 2 to 4 months, not a traditional brand campaign that takes 12 to 18 months with, original really great like quantifiable research, which is awesome. You should still do brand campaigns, but like this can be done in 60 to 120 days for sure.
Yeah. So like this mantra of doing what you can with what you have is awesome. But we do know that institutions can be slow moving. We've worked with, plenty of small to large institutions that just like they're entrenched in certain processes and there's committees to make 8 decisions.
Yeah. This is great.
How are you pushing for the innovation without alienating some of those key stakeholders that might be a little more resistant?
Totally. So one of the biggest pieces is because it's a sprint campaign, which really is more brand refinement than brand development, meaning we're refining your current position and we're refining your current assets. For the most part, we're able to do it without really telling anybody and without asking for approval because they've already approved the past campaign, right? The past content was approved. Someone approved the production. Like, oh no, this isn't a nuke. So I should even clarify, if you're listening in your marketing, we call it a sprint campaign. Don't even let people in the institution know it's an air quotes campaign. Like what you're really just doing is repackaging what's already been approved. And it's like, oh no, you approved the pantry. I'm just making a new dish with the ingredients you already signed off on. There are occasions where we elevate things, a specific value proposition if we're trying to say something differently. But by and large, this effort to produce a sprint campaign is developed and approved within marketing and enrollment, and it's really not engaging broader stakeholders. Now, I will say that is leaving people behind, and that's why institutions should. And a lot of our partners, we still work on like a larger brand campaign effort where it's like, we'll do the sprint campaign and then overlapping that, let's do a larger brand campaign over like 12 plus months. And that, I will say that work is very, very valuable, but you can do the sprint campaign without seeking significant approval because all of the assets and content already existed. And that's been really sort of the secret to sprint through without necessity of committees or too much formal approval in the process.
I'm kind of like smirking over here because as you've been talking, I am like, I'm getting some deja vu back to that failures episode. I think that we did, it was a couple months ago, where this feels like your evolution of asking for forgiveness, not permission, in a way that doesn't totally alienate people. Look at you, Seth, learning from past mistakes.
Totally. And I'll say this too. We launched the sprint campaign, and then within a matter of a month, we have data showing how well it's performing, right? And it's performing better because we created more of the ads that already worked. We produced a higher volume of assets, which alone, that's like the best thing you can do for advertising. And we've tweaked our value proposition. So basically, by the time people even see new assets in market, we're already showing up saying, look at how well this campaign is performing. So we're having the data to back it up. But exactly, it's not building something totally in isolation. It's just refining something that already exists. So it's a little more palatable if and when people start to wonder what's going on with all the new ads they're seeing.
Well, we have already hit over that 15-minute mark. I've been keeping an eye on the clock, Seth. We're so close. But just so in closing, like if an institution is feeling a bit hesitant to embrace this more sprint style, zero budget approach, what's your one piece of advice for them?
My one piece of advice is if you want to improve market performance and you don't have budget for a big brand campaign, just ask your team internally, what more can we do with the content that we have? There are answers to that, and I'm telling you, your team already knows. Like there are folks within the team that know the things they want to do. So don't do new, just do current better. And you could do a sprint campaign light. You could just create a version of just a few assets. So it can be as big or as small as you want. But the biggest lesson to me in the sprint campaign was I'm just always blown away that 100 days into a new partnership, we're able to drive significantly improved performance. And it's not just like, oh, we're so great. It's the fact that you can actually produce great performance from the content you already have. And I think that's a lesson anybody can embrace. And it's a lesson that anyone's teams, if you're listening, like they can produce more assets from what you already have, and it can improve performance. So it's worth slowing down and asking them what more you think they can do with what you already have.
It's fantastic. I have a few ideas kind of churning in my head about how at Enrollify we might be able to apply some of these concepts. So thank you, Seth, so much for educating me, for educating our listeners on what these sprint campaigns can be. And folks, as we're closing out this episode, I failed to mention this last week, but we're actually now in week 2 of a really cool 3-part pulse check series called High School to Higher Ed. This is a father-daughter perspective. Kevin Kavanaugh, who is a seasoned enrollment management professional, is joined by his 9th grade daughter, Emma, on this series. And together, they kind of break down the college admission process through her perspective.
Very cool.
It is so cool. Like, everyone has to run and listen to this.
Yeah.
Last week's episode was on how Emma and like 9th graders view college. Super interesting to hear her talk about how like she and her friends discover colleges at this age. And then in this week's episode, Emma's going to talk about her reactions to some of the messaging that she has already received from colleges and universities, both the good and the bad. So
Love it.
Super cool. And as we are sitting here talking about refreshing brand campaigns and marketing messaging, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to mention this because it totally lines up.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to totally tune in for that.
Amazing. All right, folks, we did it in 19 minutes. I don't know.
We got 1 minute off.
We shaved 1 minute off. Next week, we're going for 18.
I love it. We can do it. We're on our way.
We're on our way. All right, folks, we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye. The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.